What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you kind of a high-level overview of the land mobile. LMR stands for land mobile radio. I call it LMR versus cellular. And what that is the good, the bad of land mobile radio and the good, the bad of cellular. Now let me say right up front, both of them have their purpose. I love my iPhone. I live on my iPhone. But then you can't always do everything with a cell phone. You have to have a radio at times. You have to have a cell phone. So, if I can, there we go. Okay, as I said, it's going to be a high level. We're going to take a look at the technology and where it is needed in our operations within TxDOT, or for that matter in any public safety or any agency or organization. And I'm going to give you a real basic understanding of how each technology works. Now this is very high level. I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds, which people know me, I can get into real easy. Okay, LMR, better known as land mobile radio. That's the radio system that we use, which is mostly the maintenance folks out in the field. Webster and the FCC defines LMR as a wireless communication system used by persons in vehicles, those are the mobile radios, or in hand, portables. Such systems are used by emergency first responder organizations like police, fire, ambulance, EMS, transportation agencies, and people with large vehicle fleets or numerous field staff. Cellular communications is defined as a wireless communications technology in which several small exchanges, the cell sites, equipped with low-power radio antennas strategically located over a wide geographic area are interconnected through a central exchange, sometimes better known as a switch. If you hear me talking about a switch, that's what the central exchange is. As a receiver, your cell phone moves from one place to the next, its identity, location, your conversation, and the radio frequency is handed over one cell to another without interrupting a call. For those of you that remember the analog days of cellular telephones, as you were driving along, you would, in a conversation, you would hear you'd miss a word, or there'd be a loud click, and then suddenly it just sounded different. That was your call being handed from one cell site to another. In the digital world today, that doesn't happen very often. Okay, a little history. The first cellular telephone call was placed on April the 3rd, 1973. Cell phones have actually been around for quite a while. By a gentleman by the name of Martin Cooper, who at that time was the operations director for Motorola Radio Systems. The Dynatac. My father actually had one of these. Portable phone weighed 2 pounds and cost $3,000 each. As of 2014, over 20% of Americans have at least one cell phone. I have 3. Cell phones rely on a network of towers interlinked with the switch to control the conversation and move it from one tower to another or cell site. The primary weakness, please remember this, the primary weakness of cellular networks is if the connection to the switch to the cell site is lost, the site goes out of service and the system becomes unusable. The picture here is Marty Cooper today. This was Marty back in the 70s when he invented the cell phone. The first conversation took place in New York City, and there is a plaque on the street embedded into the concrete. I've seen it, that denotes, it's a historical plaque, that the first cell phone call was made at this location. And the funny thing was that at this time, the 2 big competitors for this type technology was Motorola and Bell Labs. Marty called his peer, the guy that was in charge of the project at Bell Labs. The first phone call was placed to the gentleman at Bell Labs to tell him, "We beat you." Didn't go over real well. Mr. Cooper, by the way, is still alive today and living in Schaumburg, Illinois. Here's an example of how a cellular network works. This also shows you why it doesn't work sometimes. As you can see, the switch here, there are some type of data connection. It could be T1s, it could be MPLS, it could be Ethernet, it can be microwave, but there's a data connection that goes from each one of the sites to the switch. And then here's everybody driving around town talking on your iPhone. I pick on iPhones because I have one. Okay. You lose a connection. That site goes out of service. You lose another connection. That site goes out of service. Now you're reducing your coverage in the area that you can work or receive a call in. Another site gone. Another site gone. So finally you're down to limited coverage. If you lose all those networks, which can happen, your system goes completely offline. Not only can you lose the connection, but you can overload the site. You can overload it with calls. For instance, the whole theory behind a cellular network, let's back up here, is that this guy is driving, imagine a roadway through here, and he's driving across here, the road. He's on this site. He gets within range of this. The switch says, you need to switch, your call needs to switch from here to here. And then he drives over here, and it switches from here to here, here to here. The whole idea is that they're driving, you're moving, going from one site to another. If you stop moving, your call stays on one site. Hurricane Ike, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, Jerry World, AT&T Stadium, NCAA football game back last year sometime. AT&T, and the reason I know this is I have friends that work there, AT&T deployed 15 CALs, cellular on wheel sites. They're supplemental cell sites. AT&T Stadium has an incredible cellular system in it. I've seen it. It is impressive. The game and the people trying to make calls locked it down. There were, for several times, nobody, from what I'm told, could get a call the first time. You just sit there and kept trying to make a call. You would either get a fast busy or your phone just wouldn't do anything. And AT&T alone deployed 15 cellular on wheel sites to supplement what was already in the stadium. Now that's just AT&T. That doesn't include Verizon. It doesn't include Metro PCS. It doesn't include Sprint, T-Mobile, and who knows who else up there. It was a major problem, major. They're also fixing to spend almost $1 billion to upgrade that system so that this won't happen again. Okay, let's go forward. Land mobile radio, on the other hand, has been around since the end of the 19th century. 1896 to 1897, Guglielmo Marconi filed for his first patent protection of his radio apparatus. That's what they called it, not a radio system, but an apparatus. He established the Wireless Telegraph and Signal Company in 1897. That was in New York. Radio was used in World War II by both sides of the war. Germans actually used it more than we did. Land mobile radio began use by law enforcement in the 1920s at broadcast stations such as Austin's KLBJ, it was known as KTBC back then, broadcast messages one way to police cars. This was back before they had reliable two-way communication as we know it today. The police cars would have a receiver, we call it an AM radio today, and the old calling all cars, well, the police department would call the radio station and say, we need you to put out a broadcast about this. So they would interrupt the programming and say, calling all cars, there is a wreck at blah, 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 blah intersection, please respond. That's how public safety land mobile radio dispatching began. One of the first public safety 800 megahertz trunking systems was built in the late 1980s in Arlington, Texas. It was the second one. The first one was in Phoenix, Arizona. Digital communications, P25 as we know it today, which TxDOT is moving to, is rapidly becoming the default mode of operation in most of today's public safety land mobile radio systems. The way a land mobile system works, it's different. You have repeaters, and you have what's called duplex operation. In other words, just as it shows here, you have two people that want to talk. You have a repeater. It's usually located someplace that is desirable, such as a high location. Most of ours are at our offices. That doesn't always mean they're in a high location. But you have a tower, 200 feet, 300 feet, 500 feet, and you have two radio frequencies. One person talks to the repeater on one frequency. The repeater retransmits it in real time at a higher location and higher power to the guy that you're talking to. And then the process reverses. and it all happens in real time. A lot of things a lot of things control your range. In other words, the higher the tower, the higher elevation the repeater at, if one of the users is not down in a low location. But all those things are also come into play in a cellular system. It's RF. RF is basically line of sight, or at least the frequency ranges that we use. Okay. These modes offer scalability of operations, wide area communications, and can be networked, such as trunking or radio over IP. Trunking is the grandfather of cellular networks. It's a bunch of repeaters that are tied together with a switch, and using a radio, it moves from one tower to from one tower to another tower. Now, the thing about trunking is you can lose the network and you can lose the switch, but that repeater that you're on keeps operating. So it has a fail-soft. It has it's called fail-soft, or a fallback mode of operation. Also, the lowest level of land mobile radio communications, which cellular phones cannot do, and there are vendors that will tell you they can, trust me, they can't, is called simplex. That's where you have two people wanting to communicate. They're on a single frequency. They're transmitting and receiving to each other on the same frequency. Only one person can talk at a time. It is short-ranged, anywhere from a mile to a few miles, depending upon a lot of criteria: terrain, height, power, quality of the radio, other things. But you always, in land mobile radio, you always have that lowest common denominator. You always have that fallback, which you don't have with cellular phones. And as I said, there are vendors today that are telling people, oh, ours can do that. No, they can't. Here's another example of how a repeater system works. Here we've got the repeater up on a mountain. Wish we had some mountains to put some on. And then we've got a mobile over here that's talking to a base station over here, and a guy with a portable. And you can see how the repeater allows to extend the range and link all these people together. Currently, TxDOT has 336 repeaters in service around the state of Texas. That is one for every maintenance, nearly every maintenance section, and or a district office where we may have a couple for special uses. Something else that land mobile radio provides that cellular does not provide is what's called situational awareness. The military learned this the hard way. Knowing where and who is located in relationship to others and events. Cellular has one-to-one conversations. Now, yes, you can conference call people in, but as a general purpose, it's one-to-one. I can call my boss, Henry. Henry can call me. We're the only two on the conversation. It takes a long time, depending upon the complexity of the phone and the number. It takes a long time to dial the number. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the call goes through. Remember that cell site blocking? AT&T strives very hard to keep their capacity or loading, the percentage of traffic going through a cell site, at 99%. That's a cash register for them. If it's not ringing at 99%, they're not making money. 1%, 1.5%, and it goes into call blocking. Also, you have to repeat dial over and over to communicate to multiple users. In other words, I call Henry, then I need to tell Adam the same thing. So I call Adam, and then I call whoever, and then I call them, and so on and so on. Yes, you can conference call in, but it doesn't always work, and it takes extra time. Land mobile radio, one-to-many, or one-to-one with a push of a button. Let's go back to this slide. Everybody, whatever this guy's saying, all these people here, and anybody listening to this repeater just heard what he said. All of them. And you can go back. One-to-one or one-to-many. Much faster, much more efficient. Able to reach and relay message and receive feedback by users monitoring conversation independent of a network. One-to-one, one-to-many. Situational awareness, knowing where and who is located in relationship to others and the events. As I said before, the Army found this out the hard way. A number of years ago, it occurred at Fort Hood, live fire incident. The reason I know this is a friend of mine was involved in it. They had developed and deployed a really cool, encrypted, secure battlefield cell phone network. Worked real well. They were doing some artillery fire control on the network. Unbeknownst to them, there was a group of soldiers that had moved into the wrong place. A couple of them got killed. They didn't know they were there. In true style, the military had an investigation. The investigation found out that they didn't know they were there. They should have known they were there. Why didn't we know they were there? And why didn't they know we were doing the live fire? It all came down to situational awareness. The military has since gone back, in many cases, to land mobile radio. They still have the battlefield cell network, but they reevaluated how they used it. We need situational awareness. It was like somebody yesterday, I don't remember exactly who, was talking about the people busting work zones. I was talking to a guy the other day. He said, yeah, we were someplace, and a guy came through and just busted through this work zone, and he was on his phone. He was on his cell phone. Didn't see him. And they yelled at him, and everybody jumped out of the way, and the guy that was the flagger, got on his radio and yelled, everybody look out, get out of the way. Everybody got out of the way. Nobody was hurt. A few people were scared pretty good. And as the guy drove out of the zone, he was still on his cell phone. It was like he was totally oblivious, had no idea what he had done. Okay, pros and cons of each technology. Cellular. Now don't get me wrong, cellular has its place. Absolutely. But you got to put the technology in the right place for the right job. Pros, low cost of device. The devices, by the way, are subsidized, I'm having trouble saying that word, heavily by the vendors. An iPhone 6 Plus cost, if you had to buy one outright, in the $600 range. You can currently get one for around $100 as a new subscriber, or if you're upgradable. You can, and the provider is the one subsidizing the cost because they've got you for 2 years. Pseudo-secure conversation. It's pseudo-secure because you can decode and monitor that conversation. It is against the law to do so, by the way, but you can. The NSA does it all the time. The bad guys do it, and so do some of our friendly hackers. Easy and able to make and receive calls from land telephone users. That's the primary use for cell phones. Like I said, I love my iPhone. I live on it. Cell phones are data and internet enabled. Two-way radios aren't. They haven't figured out how to do that yet, and it's because cell phones are basically a broadband device, like a computer. It's a computer on radio. Cons, network dependent. Lose the network, goes off the air. Delicate network, very easy to overload or take down the network. Network can fail or be overloaded easily. Some of the vendors will tell you, oh no, our network never goes down. I'm sorry, that's not possible. And I happen to know that's not true. They'll say, well, our network's backed up. Well, yes, it's backed up for 8 hours because you have 8 hours worth of UPS batteries. What happens when the batteries go dead? And some of them actually have generators, but the vast majority of them don't. A few years ago, after Hurricane Katrina, the FCC actually came in and made a rule that the cellular networks had to have backup power for their cell sites. The cellular networks went out and looked at it and said, we'll pay the fine. It's cheaper to pay the fine than to retrofit the backup power. So a lot of them, that's exactly what they're doing. Monthly recurring cost. Everybody gets a phone bill. Even TxDOT gets a phone bill for your iPhone. Monthly recurring cost. Devices not very rugged, easy to damage or lose. I've lost one. I've been through two. My daughter on a regular basis washes hers. I don't know how she does that. It's not real good for them, by the way. No fallback or fail-safe mode of operation. Pros and cons. Land mobile radio. you can begin to see where each one has its place. Pros, network independent, simplex mode, person to person. Can have a true secure conversation. In the digital mode, the P25 digital mode, you can have an actual secure conversation that even the NSA says they can't crack. Networkable with trunking and radio over IP systems. No monthly recurring fees unless you're on a trunking system and you didn't negotiate your deal very well. Has fallback mode of simplex operation. Cons, device cost is higher, sometimes quite a bit higher. User usually maintains the infrastructure. In other words, we have to maintain our own towers, our own repeaters, our own mobile units, our own portable units. We maintain our own equipment. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I think it's good because we have control. We have control of the quality and what we do and what we use. And there is a need for training the user on how to operate. The radios are more complicated than using an iPhone. Users of and what technology. This is an example of who would need what. Office workers and administrators in that category. Cell phone is the most viable item. Need to talk to contractors, other similar workers, make phone calls to vendors. Do not normally go into the field. Need smaller device, easier to use. Maintenance and field operations and emergency management. Anybody that works in the field. Land mobile radio is the most viable device. Need to communicate one-to-many, one-to-one. Need to interoperate with other agencies, DPS, local, city, county, and users of LMR systems, because they all use it. They use cell phone too. Need of communications that can operate independent of a network. Hurricane. I guarantee you your cell phone network will go down. Or in emergencies or in areas where cellular is not available. Down along the border, Laredo district, there's lots of places out there. Big Bend area, El Paso. Cell phones don't work. The 4-6's Ranch up in the Childress district. There's a lot of places on the 4-6's Ranch. Cellular is still not available. Who needs both technologies? Some do. Maintenance management supervisors, field operations, emergency management, safety people, communications coordinators, in other words, your radio guy. Both cellular and land mobile radio are the tools of their trade. Have the need and ability to communicate one-to-many, one-to-one, as well as place phone calls for various reasons of support. Coordination of troubleshooting and events and issues. By having both of the technologies, the user can have maximum interoperability and also operability with workers and other agencies. This is a picture of one of the radios that we're buying today. It's a P25 digital capable. It's expensive. They're $5,000. Anybody remember these? Anybody have one of those? That was an old analog cell phone. I still have mine. It doesn't work anymore, but I still have it. Belongs in a museum. That's from about circa 1988, 89, someplace along in there. They were analog. They were great. Okay, a little wrap up and takeaway. Each technology definitely has its place, and I hope I've helped explain some of the theories behind that. Neither will replace the other as a one-stop solution. There are vendors, mostly cellular vendors, that are out today banging on doors saying, we have a cell phone with a special app on it that's going to replace your radio system. No, won't happen. Go back, network, no fallback, etc. Can't replace the radio system. Tailor the technology to the user and the job they perform. Some people need one, some people need the other, some people need both. Evaluate that need of the user frequently. Do we always need to have one or the other or both? Jobs change, duties change. Never lose sight of the pros and cons of each technology. Land mobile radio is and will be for a long time the only mission-critical means of communications. TxDOT, I always like to say, and yesterday in a lot of the stories, especially the Extra Mile Awards, I was sitting there going, who's the first responder here? Our guys were. Wasn't the fire, wasn't the police, wasn't the EMS. Our guys were there first. We're the first responder. If anything, we're the original first responder, because if we don't keep the roads open, we don't build the roads, we don't handle those roads, we don't run those roads, none of those people go anywhere. None of them can do their job. We're the first responder. We have to have a mission-critical communication system. Land mobile radio is the only one today, and for a long time will fit that bill. Cellular is great. It has a place in our life. It has a place in our job. Land mobile radio is great. It has a place in our life. It has a place in our job. Some people need both. Some people only need one. But when it comes down to the bottom line, the mission-critical need that our agency, that TxDOT has, land mobile radio, in 95% of the cases, is the tool. Any questions? I'd also like to say that we have a radio operations manual. It is on Crossroads under the Traffic Operations webpage, or you can send me an email. Wow, what happened there? Okay, or you can send me an email, and I will be happy to send it to you. And I have a package, so to speak, that has a lot of other information. I think somebody had a question. Yes, sir.
Make a good case for the land mobile radio and emergency operations. But I was curious, you may not know the answer, but I'm curious. In Katrina, supposedly they said New Orleans was out of touch with the world for like several days or a week. But back then it seemed like radio was even more used. Do you know why that would have happened? Or do you think that was true? They were completely out?
They were out because all of the switches for all of the cellular networks in New Orleans at that time were in the basements of the respective offices, because I was actually working for Primeco, which is the predecessor of Verizon, by the way. There we go. I was working for Primeco, which was the predecessor of Verizon at that time, and myself and 3 other people, we were sent over there to drain the water and put it back online, because New Orleans was a Primeco market. We found interesting things in that water. It was not fun, but we got it back. The T-Mobile switch, or what we know today as T-Mobile, it was something else back then for the Houston area. Back then, during Tropical Storm Allison, this was a tropical storm. It filled up all the tunnels in downtown Houston. It also filled up the switch for T-Mobile that was in the basement of their office just off of downtown Houston. So that's an example. Network goes down, they go down. Cell phones are broadband today. They're digital. They're nothing but a broadband handheld device. The networks are delicate. They don't like to hear that, but they are. Yes, sir. Gerald.
I just want to thank you for the work that you do on this and the communication that you're sharing with the districts across the state. I know that a lot of our districts have gone out and we're doing some research on it, but I want to encourage them to work through your office on this. For me, this is such an important safety issue. With what's happening on our border today and the expectations for TxDOT and emergency response situations, to have communication back at home base is critical for us, in my opinion, as we move forward with what we're being challenged to do in transportation. So please work with Paul and his office on your game in your local area. If there's anything that we can help you with on this, it's very important to us, I will tell you that. Just thank you for what you're doing. Please work with his office as you develop your communication plan. Great presentation.
Thanks, Joe. You take care. Okay, any other questions? Probably ran over.